In 1987, AdLib revolutionized the world of DOS gaming with the world's first de facto standard PC sound card. If you're into vintage computers, an obvious choice for your early PC is to get an AdLib sound card. But unfortunately, AdLib cards have become very rare and expensive in recent years. A while back I made a video where we had a look at the better option. My favorite sponsor PCBWay has something called shared projects on their webpage, and that is where I found these replica boards. I didn't go for the original look though. Instead, I wanted to try out these matte black and gold PCBs. The obvious occurred to me as soon as I got the components on the board. This card needs more gold. So I reached out to you guys and asked if someone would redesign these cards and add a large golden AdLib logo where the original white logo used to be. Several viewers took me up on the request and sent me Gerber files. So first of all, thank you guys, I'm dying to see the final result. These PCBs are made with the first Gerber files I got in my mail, and they were sent in by viewer Mr. Guru. Okay, so let's see what PCBWay sent me. So there are several projects in this box for some upcoming videos. So I might hide a few things away. And I've got a free pen. Very nice. And here are our golden AdLibs. So let's get them unwrapped and see what Mr. Guru managed to make with these PCBs. It's looking good so far. So the back is almost identical to the cards we built in the previous video, but there are some minor changes. It's been a while, so I don't remember the details. But the thing is, since we're not going with the original look, it's kind of pointless to have that expensive volume knob. And this knob is actually the most expensive part in the entire build. So he made a small redesign of these pads too, to take a much cheaper standard pot. And we might even skip that, because nobody's using this volume knob anyways. It's kind of pointless. So we might actually make another mod and just use a regular resistor. Now let's flip these PCBs and see what they look like. Yeah, that is very nice. That looks awesome. That is so much better than without the golden logo. Yeah, I'd say these are perfect now. I'm not sure how well the camera picks this up, but this card looks very fancy. Well, I guess we better start soldering. So the way this works is that most of the components on an AdLib card are still available as new parts from most of the large suppliers. And the only two obsolete parts for this project are these two chips here. So this is the Yamaha YM3812 and the Yamaha Y3014B. And these could easily be found on eBay, and they are still surprisingly cheap. But I don't think it's gonna stay that way for long. So I have stashed up with a lifetime supply of these. So if you order these boards without the modifications, you will have a silk screen on the board that will show you what components go where. And I'm just using an older project that has the silk screen to figure out what component go where. It's a bit of a hassle, but I think it's worth it, because this card is going to look really nice. But with the silk screen you don't really need an instruction at all actually. It's hard to see on this board, but the values are actually printed directly on the board. And this is actually a perfect beginner's project. All the components are through-hole. So if you do a Google search on PCBWay AdLib replica, you will find this project. And the only thing you need to do is to add it to your cart and make an order. There's also a Mouser cart available, so you can just copy and paste the entire Mouser cart and place an order for the required components. And I'm not gonna go over every single step here, because this is such an easy build. And that was the last resistor. I guess I better do some soldering now. Otherwise we're gonna have a huge mess of wires. Okay, all looking good so far. Let's get some ceramics on that board. That was the last cap. And it quickly gets messy on this side of the board. I guess I better do some soldering and cut those legs off. If I'm not mistaken, this project started off with Sergey making an AdLib compatible card, and then TubeTime redesigned it to look like the original card. And now of course there are many different versions of this project, but none of them is as shiny as this golden AdLib. And there was actually an AdLib gold card, but that's a rare collectible, and I don't think it's compatible with that many games. So although I think it's a really cool card to have, it's not very useful compared to the original AdLib. And if you don't have soldering skills, you can always check eBay, because quite often pre-built cards are listed. And these are not very expensive, they're actually quite cheap. And especially if you build it yourself. And it gets even cheaper if you skip that expensive born spot that nobody's using anyways. I guess if you're going for the original look, then you probably want to use it. And we're obviously not going for the original look today. So we are going to replace it with either just a resistor or a small trim pot. I'll see what I can find in my stash. Okay, let's get rid of this mess and add some more components. That's much better. And next up we have some tantalums. So pay attention to the polarity, unless you want to fill your lab with smoke. Now check this out. That damn thing cracked. Oh sh**. I don't think I have a spare. Well, I guess this is an opportunity to have a look inside the tantalum cap. Well, there are just 2 leads and some black gunk. Well, I'll see if I can find a replacement. Well, I couldn't find a new one, so I had to borrow one from another board. And I guess I'll order some more. That was the last tantalum. And these are clearly marked with polarity. And I don't really know if you can replace these tantalum caps with regular ceramic caps. But you probably can, and we might give that a try. And by the way, last week I pulled a resistor leg out of my toe. Damn, that hurt. So since then I'm quite careful not to drop these on the floor. Next up we have the only diode on this board. And then we have 1 transistor. So let's bend the legs and make it fit. Like so. And it goes up here. I try not to solder in stuff with bent legs, but sometimes I get lazy. And this board only has 1 electrolytic cap. And it goes up here. And it looks pretty good among all those blue resistors. Maybe I should put this card on display and just use one of my ugly AdLibs. And now is a good time to put the audio jack in. But these tend to get very badly bent legs in shipping. So we're gonna have to straighten up these legs. This is not the first time I had to straighten up legs on an audio jack. But now it fits quite nicely. Now let's bend some more. That's better. Okay, time to put some ICs on this board. And I'm gonna put them all in sockets. So I tend to just solder 2 legs in the middle of the socket. And then I make sure that the socket sits flush, which it doesn't in this case. So if you get it all weird like this, you can quickly just fix it. But don't push on the socket right away. Heat up the solder first. Otherwise you're gonna push that pin right through the socket. And that's much better. Nice and flush. And we're almost done here. 2 more sockets. And then we need to find a good solution for that pot. Unfortunately, the legs of the sockets are much thinner than the through holes. So if you're picky, you can see that some of the sockets look a bit skewed, because they can move around quite freely in those through holes. I guess it's not a big deal, but I find it slightly annoying. And there isn't really a quick fix for it. Well, I guess you could use machined sockets. But I have kind of moved away from machined sockets. And I'm mostly just using dual wipe sockets nowadays. Since I found out that machined sockets don't make good contact with reused chips. And I quite often do repairs. So I put chips back on the board quite frequently. But on a project like this, with brand new chips, machine sockets would definitely work well. Now let's take care of that pot. So these holes here are for the original Born's pot. And this set here has been added by someone for more modern pots. Unfortunately, I don't have one of these either. From what I can tell in the Gerber files, these lower holes here are not connected to anything. So only these 2 holes here, or these 2 holes here, are connected to the pot. So if we measure the resistance between these 2 pads, we've got 5.5K. And I used this card quite recently, and hopefully I haven't touched that volume knob. And it's probably a 10K pot. So I found these in my stash. So these are obviously trim pots. And these are 10K pots. So I guess we could just bodge one of these. Let's bend some legs. Okay, so I have bent the middle leg. So all legs are now in a row. So if I'm not mistaken, we should be able to use this trim pot like this. And then we can set the volume level to low level. And I can just connect it directly to my mixer or an amplifier or whatever you have at hand. Yeah, let's try this. We might as well preset the volume level. Well, it actually already is quite close to where my other card was. So I'm just gonna leave it like this at 5.2K. Now we could of course make this a bit more scientifically and measure the level and get it set at correct low level. I think it's 1.5 volts or thereabout. But this is good enough for me, at least for a test. Okay, let's get some chips in those sockets. So the first IC here, and then we've got 2 74LS138s. Like so. And I got a bent pin. Crap. Why did that happen? Let's straighten it up again. And try again. Well, the socket looks okay, so I guess I just better be more careful. That's better. Next up we have a 74LS245. And next up we have a 74LS04. Yeah, look at that socket, it's all skewed. Perhaps I'm a bit silly. I find that slightly annoying. Next we have an RC4136. And up here we have an LM386. And then we've got the 2 obsolete chips from eBay. The Y3014B. And then of course we have the famous OPL2 chip. However, I can tell right away that this is not new old stock as it was advertised. So first of all, it's all dusty. And secondly, there is some solder residue left on the legs. So it hasn't even been cleaned properly. But hey, I don't care too much, as long as it works. And I think quite a lot of the nice chips you find on eBay are probably just cleaned, reused chips. And I have even used a few chips on this channel in previous projects. and had some fake markings on them. So someone had sanded off the text and added new text with a fresh date. So they might as well just skip the cleaning process entirely. We're almost done. We also need to modify a bracket to fit with our audio jack. Okay, so one of these brackets is actually included in the Mouser cart. So these are easy to find. And if you're going for the volume knob, you're gonna need to drill 2 holes. But we only need 1. We'd better remove those sharp edges with a file. Otherwise I'm gonna cut myself on this damn thing. Well, I guess we better clean this mess up before we put the bracket on. These matte black cards are a bit tougher to clean, because they're not very forgiving. You need to get your board perfectly clean. So all we need to do now is put that bracket on. And even the screws were included in that Mouser cart. Like, I didn't have enough of those. And we're done! Well, that's a pretty good looking sound card if you ask me. But the question remains, does it actually work? I guess we better try it out. And I'm not gonna make it easy on me, so I'm gonna go ahead and see if I can find something that's broken. And we'll see if we can fix it. Well, how about this messed up IBM PS2? We restored this machine in a previous video. And the only thing that wasn't working was the diskette drive. However, immediately after I had uploaded the video, the diskette drive started to work. And it has been working consistently since then. We replaced the caps in the drive, so I guess that fixed it, but for some reason it wouldn't work on our first test. Now the interesting thing about this machine is when I did the outro in that first video, I noticed that our prince is wearing pink pajamas. So this machine has some weird and interesting faults with the graphics. I have a suspect on my list, so let's give it a try and see if we can fix it. Well, I did a full disassembly in that first video, so I skipped ahead here and removed the lid off camera. So this fault could be caused by many different things, of course, but the 2 main suspects is this DAC here and this IBM custom chip here. And since our DAC here is in a socket, that's where I'm gonna place my bets. So the IBM PS2 was released in April of 1987. But this is a very early board, so this chip was actually made in 1986. These custom chips here are unobtainium, but these DACs could occasionally be found on eBay. But we're not going to wait for eBay shippings. I'm going to go through my stash and see if I can find a chip. Well, I couldn't find a chip in a socket, but I found a spare board with our chip here soldered to the board. And this is a fairly early board too. This chip here is from week 12 of 1987. And later boards didn't have these ceramic and gold chips. And this board here has saved 2 other PS2 systems so far. Let's see if it has enough working parts left to save another PS2. I am a bit worried here because the legs are cut flush at the back of the board. So I hope those legs are long enough. And by the way, this chip is tested and working. Okay, let's add some fresh solder and make this a bit easier. Well, I don't know very much about colors, but the prince's clothes are supposed to be white. And if they are red, I guess the blue and the green is missing. Isn't that how it works? Let me know in the comments if you know more about VGA graphics than I do. Well, actually it's not VGA graphics. This board actually has MCGA graphics. It's a predecessor to VGA. And it's compatible with a lot of DOS games, but not all games. Prince of Persia, however, is one of the games that should be compatible with MCGA. at least you can choose MCJ graphics in the menu, which I have done, of course. Okay, let's get that chip off the board. And one of the machines that this board has saved is actually the 8-bit guy's former 7496 executive workstation, the famous founded computer reset machine. So this board is a bit of a hero. It has sacrificed the chip for the greater good. And that's the tricky bit with working with PS2 systems. A lot of the chips are impossible to find, because they were never sold separately. And they were custom designed for IBM to use on these boards. So many of the chips on this board don't even have a datasheet available. And one of the pins wouldn't let go of its solder. So let's have a second go. That's better. Well, the chip looks pretty clean from this side. So let's gently pry and see if it's loose. No, not quite. So I'm gonna have to bring out the rework station. Well, I don't want to heat this chip too much, but we have to get it unstuck. And even if I'm taking spares off this board, I may actually end up using this board. And I'm not using any force whatsoever. I'm being extremely gentle here. And there's our chip. Okay, let's have a look at those short legs. Well, they're not too bad. They are actually longer than I thought they would be. Yeah, we can probably reuse this chip. I'll just quickly clean those legs off with some solder wick. And then we will try it out on our PS2. Okay, let's get some flux on those pins. And some solder wick. And a large tip. This probably doesn't show up on camera, but there is some solder left on the legs. So if you put this chip in the socket, it will probably destroy the socket. And that is why I'm cleaning it. Well, that looks good enough to me. So I'll just clean that flux off. And we should be ready for a test. Okay, let's get that suspect chip out. And we better add some DeoxIT into that socket. And make sure it makes good contact. The socket is a bit weird, so I can't see if it's a single wipe socket or a dual wipe. And now we can put our slightly newer chip on the board. And this PS2 actually doesn't have the more challenging MCA bus. Instead, it's using regular 8-bit ISA slots. So it will happily take our new fancy custom AdLib card. Okay, time for a test. The hard drive doesn't have a working system, so we're gonna have to boot from a diskette. Okay, let's go to setup on the Prince of Persia diskette. And in here we have MCJ graphics chosen. And for sound device, we're going to change from standard PC speaker to AdLib. And for music synthesizer, we're going to go with AdLib 2. And exit to DOS. Well, the graphics are still partially working at least. But the question is the pink pajamas gone? Let's find out. Well, the sound sure works, so that's a good start. But I think the graphics are still messed up. So I'm gonna turn the volume down here on my mixer and add real recording from this card. And unfortunately I didn't get that pot set correctly because the clipping LED is flashing on my mixer. So 5.2K is not enough to bring it down to low level, but that's an easy thing to adjust. So the sound you're hearing now is recorded directly from the AdLib card. I'm not sure about the graphics so far, but I think we will see in a minute. I don't quite remember what the colors should be here, so I'm gonna have to wait until we see the prints. And no, he still wears pink pajamas. So that DAC is good. Well, in that case, I'm afraid it's that custom IBM chip. I can't say for sure, of course, until we have tried it. But unfortunately I don't have a spare chip. So if you have a spare PS2 board, you know where to send it. But the custom AdLib card was definitely a success. I think it looks awesome, and as they always do, it sounds amazing. It's an absolute must if you're collecting vintage computers. And even if you have one of the original cards, chances you have more than one system. So instead of swapping that card in and out of different machines, you may consider building a few of these up and just leave them in the machine. And for early PCs, like this 8-bit machine here, it's the perfect match.
Hey, Tektronix, can I have an AdLib too?
No, Mac, you've got no expansion slots.
Bummer.
I would like to end this video by saying thank you to my patrons. I really appreciate your support. And I would also like to say thank you to the viewer Mr. Guru for making that change to the card. I think it looks perfect now.
Thank you for watching. Remember to subscribe. I'll see you soon in the next video.